The hot tub's steam curled into the cool Colorado night, wrapping us in a haze that felt like a secret. I was 18, heart pounding, sitting alone in the bubbling water at my best friend's house, when Ethan slid in beside me. His shoulder brushed mine, and the world tilted. We'd been inseparable since middle school. Two kids who'd grown up throwing footballs in backyards and sneaking beers from his dad's fridge. Ethan was the golden boy, blonde hair, quarterback grin, the kind of guy who could charm anyone. I was quieter, the artist with paint-stained hands and a habit of overthinking. But that night, under the stars in his family's sprawling Denver suburb backyard, something shifted. His knee grazed mine under the water, deliberate, and I didn't pull away. Couldn't. My pulse was a drumbeat, loud enough to drown out the hum of the jets. "Luke," he said, voice low, like he was testing the weight of my name. His blue eyes caught the glow of the string lights above us, and I saw it. A flicker of something I'd always hoped for but never dared name. Fear and want twisted in my chest, twin flames I didn't know how to control. We weren't supposed to be like this. Not here, not in a town where church marquees preached love but meant something narrower. Not when Ethan's dad, Pastor John, led sermons about sin and salvation every Sunday. But there we were, inches apart, the water hiding the way his fingers found mine beneath the surface. I should have stopped it. I should have laughed it off, made a joke, kept things safe. Instead, I leaned closer. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice shaking, "what are we doing?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His hand tightened around mine, and the world outside the hot tub. His dad's expectations, my mom's quiet worries, the town's judging eyes, faded to nothing. The next morning, I woke up in Ethan's guest room, my head spinning with the memory of his touch. We hadn't kissed, hadn't crossed that line, but the weight of what happened sat heavy between us. At breakfast, Ethan acted normal, tossing me a pancake across the table like we were still just buddies. His mom, Karen, smiled warmly, oblivious, while Pastor John read his newspaper, muttering about the upcoming church fundraiser. I kept my eyes on my plate, afraid they'd see the truth written on my face. Ethan drove me to school in his beat-up Jeep, the radio blaring some pop song I barely heard. "You good?" he asked, glancing over. His voice was casual, but his knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "Yeah," I lied, my stomach nodding. "You?" He nodded, but his jaw was tight. We didn't talk about the hot tub. We didn't talk about how his hand had lingered on mine, or how I'd wanted to pull him closer instead of letting go. At school, he was back to being Ethan the quarterback, high-fiving his teammates, while I drifted to art class, sketching his profile in the margins of my notebook. That afternoon, we met at the town's old quarry, a place we'd claimed as ours since we were kids. The cliffs loomed above us, jagged and gray, the water below it deep, still blue. Ethan tossed stones into the depths, each splash echoing. "Last night," he started, then stopped, staring at the ripples. "You ever feel like you're hiding something so big it's gonna break you?" My breath caught. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely audible. "All the time." He turned to me, his face raw, unguarded. "I don't know how to do this, Luke. I don't know how to be this." He gestured vaguely between us, his voice cracking. "But I can't stop thinking about you." I wanted to tell him I felt the same, that I'd been in love with him since we were 14, sharing a tent on a camping trip, his sleeping bag inches from mine. But fear clamped my mouth shut. What if this ruined us? What if he changed his mind? What if his dad found out? Instead, I stepped closer, my sneakers crunching on the gravel. "We don't have to figure it out now," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He looked at me, his eyes searching, and for a moment, I thought he'd kiss me. But then his phone buzzed, his dad, calling him home for dinner. The spell broke, and we climbed back into his Jeep, the silence between us louder than ever. That week, the tension grew. At school, Ethan was his usual self, but I caught him watching me in the halls, his gaze lingering too long. I started noticing things I hadn't before. How his laugh sounded different when it was just us. How his hand brushed mine when he passed me a pencil. Every touch felt like a spark, dangerous and alive. On Friday, Pastor John announced a youth group retreat at church, a weekend of spiritual renewal at a cabin in the Rockies. Ethan and I were both signed up, along with half the senior class. I dreaded it. The idea of being stuck in a cabin with Ethan, surrounded by kids who'd whisper if they saw us too close, made my skin crawl. But Ethan grinned when he told me about it, like it was an adventure. "It'll be fun," he said, nudging my shoulder. "You and me, like always." The retreat was a blur of campfire songs and Bible verses, but late Saturday night, Ethan found me outside the cabin, away from the others. The air was crisp, the stars sharp above the pines. "I can't keep pretending," he said, his voice urgent. "I don't want to hide this, Luke. I don't want to hide us." My heart raced. "Ethan, your dad." "I know." He cut me off, stepping closer. "But I'm tired of being scared." "Aren't you?" I was. But the weight of his dad's church, our town's expectations, my own fear of losing him, it was a cage I didn't know how to escape. Still, I nodded, and when he reached for my hand, I let him take it. We stood there, hidden by the trees, our breaths mingling in the cold. For the first time, I let myself believe this could be real. But as his fingers laced with mine, a twig snapped behind us. We froze, turning to see a shadow in the distance, one of the youth group kids watching. The shadow vanished into the trees, but my pulse didn't slow. Ethan's hand dropped mine, his face pale under the moonlight. "Who was that?" he whispered, voice tight with panic. "I don't know," I said, scanning the darkness. The campfire's glow flickered in the distance, laughter from the youth group drifting over. Whoever it was hadn't called out, hadn't confronted us. But the weight of being seen settled like a stone in my gut. Ethan grabbed my arm, pulling me deeper into the pines. "We need to be careful," he said, his eyes darting back toward the cabin. "If that was someone from church." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. We both knew what his dad's congregation would think. Two guys holding hands in the dark wasn't just a scandal. It was a sin. I wanted to tell him it didn't matter, that we could face it together, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I followed him back to the cabin, my heart pounding with every step. The next morning, the retreat dragged on with group prayers and team-building games, but I couldn't focus. Every glance from another kid felt like an accusation. Ethan kept his distance, sitting across the room during breakfast, laughing too loudly with the other guys. I told myself he was just being cautious, but it stung. By the time we piled into the church van to head back to Denver, I felt like I was unraveling. In the van, Ethan sat next to me, his knee brushing mine in the cramped seat. "You okay?" he murmured, low enough that no one else could hear. "No," I admitted, staring out the window at the passing mountains. "Are you?" He didn't answer, just pressed his knee harder against mine. A silent promise. But when we got back to town, he didn't invite me over. He said he had to help his dad with something at church, his voice clipped, distant. I walked home alone, the autumn air biting at my skin, wondering if I'd imagined everything. Monday at school was worse. Rumors spread like wildfire in our small town, and by lunch, I heard whispers in the cafeteria. "Ethan and Luke at the retreat." The words were vague, but the smirks weren't. I kept my head down, sketching in my notebook, but my hands shook. Ethan wasn't at lunch, and when I texted him, he didn't reply. I found him after school at the quarry, sitting on our usual ledge, staring at the water. His face was drawn, his usual confidence gone. "They're talking," he said as I sat beside him. "My dad heard something. He asked me this morning if I was struggling with temptation." My stomach dropped. "What did you say?" "I told him it was nothing," Ethan said, his voice hollow. "But he didn't believe me." He kept quoting scripture, Luke, about how I need to stay pure, how I'm supposed to lead by example. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him we could figure this out, but the words felt too big, too dangerous. Instead, I asked, "What do we do?" He looked at me, his eyes raw. "I don't know. I want this, us, but I don't know how to live like this. Not here." The words cut deeper than I expected. I'd spent years hiding how I felt, convincing myself it was enough to just be near him. But now, with the truth out, the world felt like it was closing in. "Do you want to stop?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "No," he said fiercely, grabbing my hand. "I don't. But I'm scared, Luke. I'm so damn scared." We sat there, hands clasped, the quarry silent around us. For a moment it was just us again, like in the hot tub. But the moment didn't last. His phone buzzed, his dad again. He let go of my hand and stood, brushing dirt off his jeans. "I gotta go," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I'll call you later." He didn't. The next few days were a blur of avoidance. Ethan was at school, but he was different, distant, distracted. He'd smile at me in the halls, but it didn't reach his eyes. I kept waiting for him to text, to show up at my house like he used to, but he didn't. The rumors grew louder, and I started noticing looks from teachers, too. My mom asked if something was wrong, her voice gentle but probing. I lied, said it was just senior year stress. On Thursday, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to Ethan's house after dinner, my hands sweating on the steering wheel. His mom answered the door, her smile tight. "Ethan's in his room," she said, but her eyes lingered on me, like she knew something. I found Ethan sprawled on his bed, headphones on, staring at the ceiling. He sat up when he saw me, pulling the headphones off. "Luke, what are you doing here?" "You've been avoiding me," I said, closing the door behind me. "Talk to me, Ethan. Please." He ran a hand through his hair, his face torn. "My dad's been on me all week. He thinks I'm confused, that I need to be fixed. He's talking about sending me to some camp, Luke. A conversion camp." The words hit like a punch. Conversion camps, places that promise to cure people like us. I'd read about them online, horror stories of kids broken down, shamed, isolated. "He can't do that," I said, my voice shaking. "You're 18. He can't make you go." "He's my dad," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "You don't know what it's like, living with him. Every day, it's like I'm failing him just by existing." I crossed the room, sitting beside him on the bed. "You're not failing anyone," I said, my voice fierce. "You're your everything, Ethan. To me." He looked at me, his eyes wet, and for a moment, I thought he'd pull away again. But then he leaned forward, and before I could process it, his lips were on mine. The kiss was desperate, hungry, like he was trying to pour all his fear and want into it. I kissed him back, my hands finding his face, his hair, pulling him closer. For those few seconds, nothing else mattered. Not his dad, not the rumors, not the town. But then the door opened. Pastor John stood there, his face a mask of shock and rage. "Ethan," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "What is this?" Ethan sprang back, his face drained of color. Pastor John's eyes burned into us, his Bible clutched in one hand like a weapon. "Luke, leave," he said, his voice cold as steel. I wanted to stay, to stand between Ethan and his dad's anger, but Ethan's pleading look stopped me. "Go," he whispered, barely audible. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself out of the room, past Pastor John's glare, down the stairs and out the front door. The night air hit me like a slap, and I stood on their lawn, shaking, unable to move until I heard shouting from inside. I drove home, my mind racing. Ethan's kiss still burned on my lips, but so did the image of his dad's face. I didn't sleep that night, waiting for a text, a call, anything. Nothing came. By morning, my phone was still silent, and dread settled in my bones. At school, Ethan wasn't there. I asked his teammates, but they just shrugged. saying he was sick. I didn't buy it. After class, I drove back to his house, but no one answered the door. Panic clawed at me. What if his dad had already sent him away? What if he was gone? I went to the quarry, hoping he'd be there, but it was empty. The water stared back at me, cold and still, like it was mocking my helplessness. I sat on the ledge, my sketchbook open, drawing Ethan's face from memory. His sharp jaw, his soft eyes, the way his hair fell when he laughed. Each stroke felt like a plea to bring him back. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the quarry. Midnight. My heart leapt, but fear followed. Was it really him? I didn't care. I had to know. At midnight, the quarry was shrouded in darkness, the moon half hidden by clouds. Ethan was there, sitting on our ledge, his hoodie pulled tight against the cold. He looked smaller, fragile, not the confident quarterback I knew. "Luke," he said when he saw me, his voice breaking. He stood, and I pulled him into a hug, holding him like he might disappear. "They're sending me away," he said against my shoulder. "Tomorrow, some camp in Wyoming. Dad says it's for my soul." "No," I said, pulling back to look at him. "You don't have to go. We can figure this out. We can." "What, Luke?" He cut me off, his eyes desperate. "Run away? Hide? You know how this town is. You know what they'll do to us." "I don't care," I said, my voice fierce. "I love you, Ethan. I've loved you for years. I'm not letting them take you." He stared at me, tears streaking his face. "I love you too," he whispered, the words raw, like they'd been trapped inside him forever. He kissed me again, softer this time, but just as desperate. We sat there, wrapped in each other, the quarry our only witness. But the moment was fleeting. Headlights flashed in the distance. Someone was coming. Ethan pulled away, panic in his eyes. "Go," he said. "If they find us together." I didn't want to leave him, but the fear in his voice was enough. I ran, hiding behind a boulder as a car pulled up. It was Pastor John. I couldn't hear their words, but Ethan's shoulders slumped as his dad led him to the car. I stayed hidden, my heart breaking, until the taillights disappeared. The next day, Ethan was gone. His mom told my mom he'd left for a retreat, but I knew the truth. I spent hours online, searching for the camp, but all I found were vague websites promising healing and renewal. Every word made me sick. I called Ethan's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted the unknown number, but no reply came. School was unbearable. The rumors had solidified into truth for some, and I caught kids staring, whispering. One of Ethan's teammates, a guy named Jake, cornered me in the locker room. "You and Ethan, huh?" he sneered. "Knew there was something off about you too." I shoved past him, my fists clenched, but his words followed me. I skipped art class and went to the quarry, sketching furiously, trying to hold on to Ethan through the lines on the page. I drew the hot tub, the retreat, his face in the moonlight. Each sketch was a piece of him, a way to keep him close. That night, I went to Ethan's house again. His mom answered, her face tired. "He's not here, Luke," she said, softer than before. "You should go home." "Did he want to go?" I asked, my voice breaking. She hesitated, then shook her head. "He didn't have a choice." I left, my chest tight with anger and grief. At home, I told my mom everything, not just about the camp, but about me, about Ethan, about us. She listened, her eyes wide, then pulled me into a hug. "I love you," she said. "No matter what, we'll get him back." Her words gave me hope, but it was fragile. I didn't know where Ethan was, what they were doing to him. All I knew was that I had to find him, had to save him, because losing him wasn't an option. I spent the next week digging. My mom helped, searching online for anything about conversion camps in Wyoming. We found a name, Hope's Path, a Christian renewal program tucked in the mountains. The website was polished, full of smiling teens and Bible quotes, but the testimonials were vague. and the contact page was a dead end. I called the number anyway, leaving voicemails that went unanswered. At school, I was a ghost. The whispers had turned to open taunts, and Ethan's absence left a hole no one could fill. I stopped going to the cafeteria, eating lunch in the art room instead, surrounded by my sketches of him. My teacher, Ms. Harper, noticed. "You're carrying something heavy, Luke," she said one day, her voice kind. "If you need to talk." I didn't. Talking wouldn't bring Ethan back. But I showed her one of my drawings, the one of him at the quarry, his eyes bright under the stars. She studied it, then said, "Whoever this is, they're lucky to have you." Her words stuck with me, a small spark in the dark. I started reaching out to advocacy groups, posting anonymously on forums, asking for help. Most responses were warnings, conversion camps were dangerous, often unregulated, and kids came back changed if they came back at all. But one reply, from a user named Freebird, gave me a lead, an address for Hope's Path, hidden in public records. I told my mom and we made a plan. She'd drive me to Wyoming that weekend, no questions asked. "You're sure about this?" she asked, her hands tight on the steering wheel as we left Denver at dawn. The Rockies loomed ahead, beautiful but daunting. "I have to be," I said. He'd do it for me. The drive was 6 hours, the last stretch a winding dirt road through pine forests. Hope's Path was a cluster of cabins surrounded by a chain-link fence, a cross towering over the entrance. My stomach churned as we parked a mile away, hidden by trees. "Stay here," I told my mom. "If I'm not back in 2 hours, call the police." She grabbed my hand. "Be careful, Luke." I crept through the woods, my heart pounding. The camp was quiet, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I spotted Ethan through a cabin window, sitting in a circle with other teens, a counselor talking animatedly. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped, but he was there, alive. I waited until night, when the camp was dark except for floodlights. I found a gap in the fence, barely big enough to squeeze through. My sneakers crunched on gravel as I made my way to Ethan's cabin, my breath visible in the cold. I tapped on his window, praying he'd hear. He did. His face appeared, eyes wide with shock. "Luke," he mouthed, opening the window. "What are you doing here?" "Getting you out," I whispered. "Come on." He hesitated, glancing back at the dark room. "They'll know I'm gone. They'll come after me. Then we'll deal with it," I said, my voice steady despite the fear. "But I'm not leaving without you." He climbed out, his movements shaky but quick. We ran, dodging floodlights until we reached the fence. I helped him through, my hands trembling as they brushed his. We didn't stop until we reached my mom's car, where she was waiting, engine running. Ethan climbed into the back seat, and I slid in beside him, our hands finding each other in the dark. "Drive?" I told my mom, and she did, the camp fading into the night behind us. Back in Denver, we didn't go home. My mom took us to a motel, paying in cash to avoid a paper trail. Ethan was quiet, his eyes haunted. "They told me I was broken," he said finally, sitting on the edge of the bed. "That I could be fixed if I tried hard enough. But all I could think about was you." I sat beside him, my heart aching. "You're not broken," I said. "You never were." He leaned into me, his head on my shoulder, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. My mom gave us space, stepping outside to call a lawyer friend who knew about cases like ours. Ethan and I talked all night about the camp, about his dad, about what came next. He was scared, but he was free, and that was enough for now. By morning, we had a plan. My mom's friend connected us with an advocacy group that helped kids like Ethan, offering legal support and a safe place to stay. We couldn't go back to our old lives, not yet. Pastor John would come looking and the town would talk. But for the first time, I felt like we had a chance. The advocacy group found us a small apartment in Boulder, a college town where no one knew our names. Ethan and I moved in together, sharing a cramped space with mismatched furniture and a view of the mountains. It wasn't much, but it was ours. My mom visited often, bringing groceries and her quiet strength, while the lawyer worked to keep Pastor John at bay. Ethan's dad had threatened legal action, claiming Ethan was unstable, but the advocacy group's resources held him off, for now. Ethan struggled. Some nights, he'd wake up shaking, haunted by memories of the camp's lectures, the shame they tried to drill into him. I'd hold him, whispering that he was enough, that we were enough. Slowly, he started to believe it. He got a job at a coffee shop, his charm winning over customers while I took community college art classes, sketching our new life, Ethan laughing in the kitchen, the two of us hiking in the foothills, our hands linked under the open sky. One evening, 6 months later, we sat on our tiny balcony, the sunset painting the mountains gold. Ethan leaned against me, his warmth steadying my heartbeat. "I used to think love was supposed to hurt," he said, his voice soft, like it was a test I had to pass. "But with you, it's just right." I kissed him, slow and sure, no longer afraid of who might see. "It's always been you," I said. "No matter what." We weren't naive. The world wasn't done with us. Pastor John still sent letters, and some days, the weight of our old town's judgment lingered. But we had each other, and that was a strength neither of us had expected. Love, I learned, wasn't just the spark in the hot tub or the thrill of a stolen kiss. It was the choice to keep fighting, to build a life together, to stand tall even when the world wanted us to hide. That night, I pulled out my sketchbook, showing Ethan the drawing I'd been working on. A portrait of us in the hot tub, the moment that started it all. The steam, the stars, his hand on mine. Across the bottom, I'd written, "For Ethan, my home." He smiled, tears in his eyes, and pulled me close. "We made it," he whispered. And we had. Not to a perfect ending, but to a beginning, one we'd chosen, together against all odds.